I've just come back from lunch in a networking group with the wonderful, magnificent women down here in Bayside in Victoria. And it's interesting because everywhere I go, everyone's got a divorce story or, a war story of what happened to them, what happened to a friend, a family member, someone that they know. Divorce touches everyone. And with the stats here in Australia being as alarming as they are, 40% of first-time marriages, 70% of second-time marriages, and 90% of third-time marriages. And it's a quite alarming stat. And if you've ever read my book, The Jellybean Jar, the idea of my book was to actually try and explain the purpose of marriage. Now, when we fall in love with someone, or when we get married, we don't ever expect for it to turn to disaster and for us to get divorced. If we did, none of us would ever get married. So we go in with our eyes wide open with these expectations of this amazing, wonderful life, and hopefully it works for all of us. In some cases, it doesn't, and in some cases, we mightn't be the reason for it turning the way that it does. It can sometimes be that our partner goes through a life-changing experience. It could be stresses at work. It could be things like how they've been brought up in their family. So they've learnt from their father or their mother how to love, and then when they fall in love and get married, as they get older, they start to show those same responses to their wife that maybe they didn't like when they were a child, but subconsciously that is now how they are treating their spouse. But what I found so amazing today is the women sort of said to me, oh, how does your husband deal with the fact that this is your job and this is what you do? So to be perfectly honest, even though I help divorced women, I also learn. I learn such a great deal about the things that are happening in their lives, what's going wrong, and you start to see some key drivers happening in their relationships. So my book, as I've said, is called The Jellybean Jar, and the idea of the Jellybean Jar is that when you first fall in love with someone, you get this beautiful, big, bright jar of jelly beans, and those jelly beans represent your love. And as the relationship goes on, jelly beans come in and they get taken out. But the idea is when something goes wrong and a jelly bean gets taken out, it's so important to make sure that you replace that jelly bean. And it could be through something as simple as just apologizing and saying I'm sorry. It could be doing something to make sure that your spouse realizes how appreciated they are. But in our marriage, it's key for me, and I know also for my husband, to make sure that our jelly beans are everywhere. Like they're all over the table, they're all over the floor. That's what's most important. So you don't ever take your love for granted, and you make sure that your spouse is the most important thing in your life. So every morning you get up and you go out of your way to make sure that you try and make their life better. It's when we start to take each other for granted that things start to dissipate and marriages start to fall apart. So yes, it is really interesting that my husband is married to me, and I know all about divorce, but I'm learning, and so is he, about the things not to do. So ultimately, that's where I want to get to. We collect data from the women and the men that we currently work with now, and I'd like to, into the future, whether that be 4, 5, 10 years from now, have enough information and data to be able to go out and show people that are happily married, actually, this is what is starting to happen. Look for these keys, and when you see them, try and prevent them. So ultimately, life is about preventing issues rather than putting the fire out once it's happened. So if there's anything that you can do to make sure that you keep your marriage alive and your love happy, and as I say, continue to replenish your jelly beans and have them all over your house, that's the most important thing. So if you need any help, or you know anyone that needs any help from the Divorce Angels, please come and contact me. via my website, which is www.tanyasomerton.com, or you can contact me via my Facebook page. Thank you.